Hey guys, Niffler here and welcome to my channel. Today I want to introduce you to my currently most favorite character when it comes to endgame mapping, my elemental crit tornado shot ranger. This character is currently level 92 and the equipment is pretty much in its final form. And after a lot of respecking and a lot of itemization changes, I want to share with you the process I've gone through in creating this character in order to help you with your own theory crafting in builds in the future. In detail, I want to discuss a little bit life versus low life or CI as an option for a ranger. And then I'm gonna talk a bit about physical damage versus elemental damage. And in the last step, I want to go over some itemization concepts or choices between certain items and explain my decision making behind that. So this is gonna be like a more theoretical video where I'm gonna discuss this theory crafting, and I'm definitely gonna do another video about how to level very efficiently with such a character and not so much focusing on the end game. So let's get started with life versus low life. As you can see, this character here is a life-based character rather than you would expect me to build a low-life character in the endgame, which is the thing that most players do because of the immense bonus attack speed of Blood Rage and the more auras you can put on. So in general, you would expect an endgame character to be low-life because it's just the best you can get when it comes to DPS. But I decided against going low life or CI on this ranger, and that has two very important reasons. One, the passive tree itself provides not that efficient pathing for grabbing efficient energy shield nodes, while still getting all the most important attack speed and crit nodes on the passive tree. So I found myself in a very bad spot trying to get a sufficient amount of energy shield with my ranger, and that not only comes from the passive tree, but very important and ranger specific, you cannot use energy shields. You can only use a quiver, and apart from this one unique quiver, which is not really a gearing option, there is nothing with energy shield on it. So all your energy shield would come from your chevrons, your helm, your boots, your gloves, and in general, in the past, when I was building low-life characters, to get high amounts of energy shield, I generally used the fact to have a really good shield, because most of the other gear was either unique or not that good in terms of energy shield. So for example, Chevron's wrappings cannot compete with a high GG energy shield chest. So low-life is very squishy with a ranger, and especially when you turn on Blood Rage, you are in this constant pressure of killing mobs, which is, in my opinion, a bit unnecessary. The character can achieve a very good DPS level, even if it's life-based, and still have the bonuses of one, having a higher life pool, more efficient pathing, and in general a more smooth and relaxed gameplay. And that is for me the reason why I choose a life-based character. I will of course upload this passive tree and link it in the description below. But with the new patch, you can also just check out my profile and check out my characters, where you can find Tormented Niffler, my ranger I'm discussing in this whole video, and you can check out his passive tree, his gear and everything there. So feel free to check out the link in the description below. That's it. So now let's proceed to the maybe more important question that most people ask themselves when it comes to building up a tornado shot ranger, because there are the two big schools of either going physical or elemental damage. And my character here is clearly an elemental damage based character, using the Wind Ripper as an endgame option and running Wrath, Anger, Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice. So why would I choose elemental over physical? Well, the first, for me, very important thing to choose elemental damage over physical damage is the leveling itself. Because while you level, in general, with a physical based build, you are much more dependent on your weapon than you are on a elemental based character. Because the base DPS in a physical based character relies very much on the flat physical damage on your bow. So in order to level properly, you are supposed to change those bows pretty frequently, so you are relying on getting a physical bow upgrade in time in order to get the clear speed going with the same pace through the whole game. But with an elemental based character, basically all you need is a decent attack speed, decent crit chance bow, and the damage will scale automatically by leveling up your auras, because this is the main source of the DPS. And especially for elemental based builds, and in general for almost all leveling with a bow, the Death's Harp unique bow is a very good example of a good leveling bow. I already made a video where I explained the value of this bow, which lies especially in the 100% global critical strike multiplier. But you can also just go with any rare bow with a decent attack speed and a decent crit strike chance, and it will scale very good through the aura leveling, and not only buying new physical weapon every few levels, which can be very costly. Which brings me to the next point. The cost of a build with this physical tornado shot is almost always a lot higher than a Windripper build, because Windripper is the absolute best endgame elemental based bow for crit, because you have the best attack speed and the best critical strike chance, the two most important things, and a 6-link Windripper in the absolute endgame costs around 40 exalts. Maybe less, maybe more, depending on the role, but in standard right now you can get a 6-link Windripper for 40 exalts, while the endgame options, or not only endgame but maybe also just comparable DPS levels, to achieve them with a physical bow, you have to invest a lot more money, and then most of the time the bow is not even 6-linked yet. So these are the first arguments made for going elemental. The cost and the leveling process is, in my opinion, superior to the physical one. But for endgame, it also has some advantages. Not only the leveling process goes more smoother, but also when it comes to the big issue of reflect, you're gonna have a better time using Windripper or any other elemental based build, because the defense against reflect is of course always your own resistance, or when it comes to physical, your armor. And resistances are generally standard capped at 75% in the end game. I guess that's general. You can say no one's running with lower than 75% resistances, and you can of course even get more resistances if needed with certain means of unique items or auras. And this 75% resist make it happen that you only get 25% flat of your damage reflected to yourself, because the reflected damage is always reduced by 75%. Now if you compare this to armor, achieving 75% armor reduction, so reduction from physical damage through armor, is very hard in comparison to achieving 75% fire resist, which is super easy. So this is one, very hard to achieve with armor, and secondly, the armor mechanic in Path of Exile is different to the one with resistances. The resistances will always lower the incoming damage by flat 75%, while the armor can be penetrated depending on how big those hits are that are incoming. And now when you think about it, you're playing a crit based build, so in generally what you do is you're dealing big chunks of damage. So if you crit, you get a huge damage spike, and when this crit is reflected to you, you get a huge hit reflected, which penetrates of course a lot of armor, making armor a very bad damage mitigation factor, making you almost always relying on Immortal Call. So if you are not able to use your Immortal Call properly, reflect is always gonna fuck you up with your Tornado Shot build on physical. And with not only the upcoming nerfs in the future, but also the not 100% reliability of cost when damage taken, Immortal Call makes it for me way too risky to play a physical based character on the endgame, as you can always kill yourself to reflect when you're not paying attention, not getting your Immortal Call off or whatever. You always have to react, while with my elemental based character I can just permanently shoot into reflect, because my Volpack Leech is higher than the reflected damage, and will always be higher, as my resistances cannot be penetrated, which is in my opinion very important. Now the next point on my list here is the attack speed, and you might wonder why attack speed is so important. Well, first of all, attack speed with a Harbinger bow, which is normally the endgame option for physical based builds, is not that high. and when you compare it to a Wind Ripper, which has 1.7 attack speed. So the attack speed is a lot higher, which makes, first of all, of course, the gameplay feeling a lot better, feeling a lot smoother. But not only the feeling is better, it is also giving you an advantage in survivability. Because my characters that deal high physical damage with Wall Pact or high elemental damage with Wall Pact, their survivability is relying on getting this leech. And as soon as you shoot your projectiles into the enemies, you're gonna have the full life again, because you leech so much life in general when you have high DPS that your life is always full for every single shot that hits an enemy. And you can only be killed in between those shots, because you're gonna have a full refill of your life after each shot. So your complete survivability relies on how often your life is gonna be refilled completely while damage is incoming. And with this rate is of course depending on your attack speed, because the more projectiles you fire out there in a short period of time, the more leech cycles will come in. And you're gonna be refilled completely. So not only feeling better with a fast attack speed, also being a lot more survivable with a high attack speed, getting out those crits, and even if you have damage incoming, you have a very short interval where your life is gonna be refreshed completely. So this is really giving the edge to elemental damage for myself. I would really recommend that. Of course, there are low downsides. Well, the first downside, of course, is Life Leech, because we have to link Life Leech to our 6-link in order to be reflect safe, as we have no possibility to get enough elemental damage leech on your jewelry or with Blood Rage. All the sweet things that the physical builds use for gaining their leech is not possible. So in general, what I have to use is Life Leech, which loses us 1 link, but on the other hand, we have those advantages. I mean, you get more paper DPS maybe with the physical build, because you can leave out Life Leech, and of course you have this mechanic I explained before, penetrating your own armor. You of course also penetrate the enemy's armor. So in general you can say mobs tend to have a lot higher resistance against elemental damage than they have against physical damage. But then on the other hand, you also shock with your lightning damage. So you have that going, which is usually not the case for physical damage, where I have to say that makes up for each other. So your physical damage is a little more effective in penetrating the mob's armor, and you can spare out your Life Leech gem. But on the other hand, when you use elemental damage, you're gonna shock stack the enemies, or now only shock them for 50% more damage, which also increases your DPS, making it almost even out in my opinion. Now I'm coming to the last support gem in my 6-link setup, which might be questioned by other players. This is Blood Magic. Right now I'm using Blood Magic in my 6-link rather than in other DPS, in another DPS gem, in order to have my Tornado Shot always out and to a 100% rate. I can never stop shooting because I ran out of mana, so I can play all the maps no matter what roles. I don't need any mana regeneration at all, because all my mana is reserved for my auras. I have 100% reservation. So in my opinion, when I was thinking about it, you have like 2 options. You can either try to get enough mana leech on your gear and really focus around mana in the passive tree, have enough reservation nodes skilled, and then leave out Blood Magic so you have an additional link, which is what you gain for all the cost. But in my decision making and in my testing, it was not worth it. It was not worth the effort. You could just put in Blood Magic, you lose 1 link, but you gain way more freedom in terms of itemization, because you don't have to care about mana at all. You need no mana on any items, you need no mana nodes in the passive tree, and of course you can save some more nodes because you don't need all this aura reservation. You can just reserve 100% and you're done. So that's the reason why I was using Blood Magic. And of course, additionally, you're independent when it comes to map mods. You can just run more maps as you are not relying on mana. You can just permanently shoot in any situation. Now I want to discuss some of my item choices with you. As you can see, this character is using a 6-link Wind Ripper, And the perks of having a 6-link weapon is that you can use a chest with no sockets. So my choice, of course, was a Chaos Heart, as it provides the much needed HP that almost all ranges lack. Even if you skill a lot of life in your passive tree, as a ranger you are almost never gonna achieve the same life level as the strength-based characters like Templars or Marauders. So the Chaos Heart really is helpful in order to get a really high HP pool. As you can see, this character here hasn't skilled any life, almost none. It is really rare that I spec life nodes. I could almost always go into damage, but still it has 6.2k life, and that is of course thanks to my Chaos Heart. And of course, in order to make this build viable, you don't necessarily need a Legacy Chaos Heart, but this is the end game spec. You can also run with a belly or with a non-legacy Chaos, which should not be super costly. But that's of course my first itemization thought. I was always struggling with a low life pool, and then I thought, well, just get a 6-link bow and get your Chaos Heart and you're good. The next thing that might surprise people is that I'm using Maligaros instead of Acuitys. I have Acuitys, but I was not using them because I felt Maligaros are more efficient. The first thing that Maligaros of course provide is an additional 5% attack speed, more crit chance, and of course more multiplier. Especially when you have access to a legacy version, you have a lot more multiplier. The downside of course is that you have to spec Volpact, which is then of course not that efficient as using Acuitys. But in my build right now, as you can see, Volpact has almost no cost in terms of points, because it's ready next to Berserking, and Berserking in my opinion is a very nice circle, as attack speed scales very good with our DPS. Attack speed on elemental based builds is always almost the best thing you can get. It is close to Constitution, the most efficient life node in the whole passive tree, and overall it fits perfectly into my passive build. When I respec Volpact, I'm also losing Berserking and Constitution and all these other nodes, because they would not be efficient to just go there without Volpact. And on the other hand, I have no real better options for them. So the points I would save with Acuitys are not really worth the saving, because there are no better options in the passive tree, and additionally the Maligaros provide more DPS, so it's almost a no-brainer to pick them. As the last point on my list, I'm gonna compare my helm choices. You have actually two options. You can go Rat's Nest or you can go Alpha's Howl. The DPS level of both is almost the same. So in terms of DPS, maybe Rat's Nest gives you the edge, but it is not much. So the difference is not really in the DPS, but the difference is another one. With Alpha's Howl, you're gonna have immunity to freeze together with another 25% resist. So if you value freeze immunity very high, you should definitely get an Alpha's Howl, as it provides this immunity. And of course, if you struggle with resist, as most of your resistances when using a lot of unique items comes from jewelry and boots, and you need real high resist plus high damage, which is always hard, this 25 cold resist on the Alpha's Howl could really help. But while I'm using Rat's Nest, has of course also its reasoning. One of course is the high attack speed. I just like more attack speed. The more attack speed you got, the better in my opinion. I'm just a real fan of that. And 15 bonus attack speed on Rat's Nest is just sick. Together with more global critical strike chance, which makes critting without power charges more likely. That was what was the main reason for Rat's Nest. But one thing that most people overlook when checking out this item is another additional 10% movement speed on the Rat's Nest. And when you check out my defense, I have almost 60% base movement speed. So I have almost double the movement speed that normal rare boots would provide me. And as a ranger using my Windripper, I have no movement skill that I constantly use, like Whirling Blades with a Spectral Foe character. So I rely on movement speed. If I have a high movement speed, I also have a higher clear speed because I can move through the map faster. So this additional 10% movement speed actually gave the Rat's Nest the edge over the Alpha's Howl in my build, especially as my life pool is high enough to not get constantly frozen. So if you are a movement speed fan like me, together with attack speed, you gonna choose Rat's Nest. If you value freeze immunity and struggle with resist, you should get an Alpha's Howl. And now, last but not least, I'm gonna show you a little trick which general rangers suffer, is where to get your movement skill when you have all your links used for the 6-link Wind Ripper. You have your main attack, then you got a Chaos Heart with no sockets, you got your helm with your auras, you got your boots with your cast damage taken, and then of course you got your gloves with the Assassin's Mark, Cursed on Hit, Herald of Thunder. How to move, and especially you cannot use any good movement skills with bows. I personally find Blink Arrow was a bad joke. It's not really useful to get over cliffs. Most of the time I'm just bugging around and I can't move with the same frequency. So what I've done is I just have a weapon swap with a Bright Beak, Leap Slam standard thing, which in my opinion is far superior to anything else that you could do. So if you struggle with this and you also always need something to get over those cliffs or to get through a shrine map without losing your mind, just get this on your weapon swap, and as you have no auras equipped on your bow or your quiver, it has no difference, you can just swap pretty fast. So that's my take on this topic. We now have a 20-minute video, maybe a bit too long, so just leave your comments or questions in the comment section below, and for more Path of Exile content, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.